Okay, in this screencast, we're going to revisit the California Standards for the Teaching Profession, also known as Teacher Performance Expectations, and we're going to be diving into them a little bit more in depth than we have up to this point. I think we've actually referenced them a number of times, and we have it as probably a somewhat of a vague idea on what they're used for and how they were developed. But I thought at this point in the course, it would be a good idea to just delve into them a little bit more in depth. Okay? Now, there are two documents that I want you to reference, and the first one is from 2009, and this is the original document. This is when the Commission on Teacher Credentialing actually occurred. And I just want to point this out to you. I'll provide this document for you. You can see that it was done under the administration of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and then who all the parties that were involved in its creation were. And that's interesting. But you can see some of the different universities and personages that were involved. But what I really wanted to get to was the actual table of contents in 2009. I might just mention before I go any further that these were revised in 2013, and we're going to be looking at those as well in this little screencast. But I wanted to show you how this particular document was organized. And you can see in this table of content there is an introduction, and it's not very long. It's only 4 pages long, and I would strongly suggest that you read through this tonight, okay, and just get an idea of the history of the organization of the standards, why they chose the 6 standards that they did, and then how these particular standards are themselves organized. There's a reflective questions, for example, that go into each one of them. Now, under each of the standards, there are specific teacher performance expectations, or TPEs, and actually there's a total of 13, and they're divided up amongst these 6 standards. Okay. Now, let me give you an example of what that looks like. So let me go to the revised standards, and here they are. So you can see, for example, in the first standard, which was making subject matter comprehensible to students, you can see that there are 3 specific TPEs. Now, what you'll notice is that some of the TPEs are common to all teachers, and some of them are a little bit more specific depending on your subject area and whether you're a multiple subject instructor or single subject instructor, that sort of thing. So, for example, in the second standard, assessing student learning, there are 2 TPEs, and one of them is how to monitor student learning. The other one is how to use and interpret assessments. The third major standard had to do with engaging and supporting students in learning. You'll read in the history of why these standards were created that California is becoming an increasingly diverse population, and they thought it was appropriate, veteran teachers and educators and researchers thought it was appropriate that new teachers specifically learn how to engage students on a multiple levels because of their diverse approach to learning. Okay, so there are 4 TPEs, and you'll see this last one, for example, specifically with English learners. Okay, again, that's particularly important to California. You'll notice again that we have these broken out by grade level as well, K3, 4, 8, 9, 12, slightly different TPEs for those teachers, and these 2 are common again to both. See that the 4th content area, planning instruction and designing learning experiences for students, and TP8, for example, talks a little bit more about engaging the student to meet them where they are, rather than have your students meet you where you are and all the neat things that you want to show them. But learning where these students come from is actually probably incredibly important to how we approach our teaching. Instructional planning, again, based on that experience of knowing our students on a different level. You can see that the last 2 standards, creating and maintaining effective environments, and then developing as a professional educator. And then these talk again more about specifically about the student and the amount of time that you should have with each and what that time should look like. And then finally, our obligations as professionals and professional growth. Now, you may have noticed that these 6 standards and subsequent TPEs somewhat mirror the teacher toolbox that we are developing for ourselves, right? In different areas of like presentation, student learning, learning to engage students, for example, depending on what kind of a learner they might be, all the way down to the very, very last, sorry about that, our last standard, which is talking about, again, professional development, which is like the 6th toolbox, 6th tool rather in the toolbox that I wanted you to look at. So again, what I would like you to do is to go to the original document, and I would like you to read through these first 4 pages so that you set a context for what is about to come, and that is the standards themselves. And then I want you to read through these standards. Now, this is a bit heavy reading. It is 16, well, actually it's 11 pages, but those 11 pages include reflective questions, different nuances. For example, let me just give you an example. Let's just go to the first one, engaging and supporting all students in learning. You see that it's on page 5. These are the first 4 pages. Let me just get through these real quickly. So read through these at the introductions. And here we go, first standard. And then go ahead and read this. Connecting, for example, students to their prior knowledge and life experience takes some knowledge on our part about what those prior experiences and prior knowledge might be. So a useful part, for example, TPE 1, using knowledge of students to engage them in learning. And you might ask yourselves these questions. How do I, or why do I, know my students as people and as learners? Understand the reasons for their behavior. Recognize atypical behavior, etc., etc. Get to know parents and connect with community where I teach. Connect student learning to prior knowledge, backgrounds, experiences. This is all, if I had to write a compendium of good advice to pass on to new teachers, these standards very much reflect what those good advice would be, from a lifetime of experience. So I think, again, it's worthwhile to read through these. What I'd like you to do is to read through them again, and then I'd like you to write in a discussion one of the questions that struck you as particularly important under each of the standards. And that's going to take a while because there's 6 standards. You're going to have to read them, and then I want you to find one of these, just one now, mind you, and then write about it, why you thought it was particularly important, right? So, for example, why do you think it's useful to have differentiated instruction to meet assessed learning needs of students and increase their active participation? Okay? We'll do that for tonight, and that should take a good portion of our time. Okay, I hope this is helpful to you, and we'll discuss it as a group afterwards.